What's up, my fellow lionesses and lions? Welcome to the Project Lioness Podcast, where we are here to disrupt the mainstream narrative when it comes to health, holism, and human consciousness. We are here to share bold truths about health and life from a female perspective. This episode is brought to you by our team, Inspire Co., where we stand for your health being inspired by choice rather than being inhibited by chance. Thank you for being here and joining in on these raw, real, and powerful conversations. We hope our show brings you inspiration and empowerment to overcome challenges, reclaim your life, and ultimately pursue your mission with power, purpose, and play. Now, let's get into the episode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Project Lioness Podcast. This is your host, Dr. Mel, and today I am joined by an amazing, incredible woman, a dear friend. And before we get into it, let me read a little bit about what and who this woman is so you all know. Her name is Samantha, and Samantha is a certified parent coach and national speaker. And she coaches parents on how to help their children calm, connect, and cooperate since 2004. She now provides continuing education and advanced training and a parent coach certification for family service professionals who support intense kids and their families, including Fraser and the Minnesota Association for Children's Mental Health. Samantha is the creator of the Mad to Glad Blueprint, a revolutionary brain and nervous system-based approach to positive communication and parenting that soothes and even prevents intense kids' most challenging behaviors. She holds a master's degree in communication disorders from the University of Minnesota and has interdisciplinary training in sensory integration, play therapy, and emotional integration. Welcome, Samantha, to the show.
So excited to be here. Thank you.
Super happy that you're here. For all of you who don't know, I realized bringing Samantha on, I have really cool friends who do really cool stuff in the universe. And Samantha and I go way back to when I was a chiropractic student. And Samantha was, one of the first, honestly, you were one of the first people who kind of opened my eyes to leading as a woman in a very, very different way. And you've had a profound impact on my life. I actually met her through Dr. Ty, her husband, who is also a neurological and pediatric chiropractor, and I interned with him. And Samantha and I hit it off, I think, almost instantly when we met. And I was like, oh, this woman's different. And Samantha's been really a mentor for me in so many ways in life. And I'm just so grateful that you're here and really excited to dive deep into what you're up to lately. So
thank you. I know when I first walked into your space, it was such a blessing to see how it's matured and like the growth and the leadership that you're embodying.
Thanks, my friend. Mm-hmm. So beyond, what I shared in your bio, which is a great bio, you've got quite the depth of your own personal experience and your own story. And many of you probably heard in that bio why I brought Samantha on. And as you all know, in Project Lioness, we're all about sharing bold, real, raw truths. And part of that is, I think, important to share how we got to where we are in that personal journey. And while this is not a 3-hour podcast, it probably could be with us.
Oh, yeah.
Share with us, what got you into what you're up to now with parents and families and kiddos and your own personal journey.
Yeah, when I started my work in 2004, I was an autism specialist and I worked with kids on social skills. So things like how to communicate and make friends and like have a childhood where they were sparked with joy by it. And I was living out in Southern California at the time. And it's a pretty classic, professional story was when I needed to transition an 8-year-old from his classroom. And I was filled with dread as I put my hand on the doorknob because I knew how that was going to unfold after being in the work for 4, 5, and 6 months, was that when I would navigate this little boy, Charlie, down the hallway, he would regularly melt down about 10 steps away from my office. And there was this moment professionally where I remember looking down at him when he's laying on the floor outside the cafeteria door. My speech therapy office is within view. And I looked down at him and I thought, I don't know what to do here. I could feel the sweat roll down my spine. I looked over my shoulder and I saw the teachers peering through the cafeteria and their classroom doors. And I could only feel judgment or my projection of judgment at the young age of 22. What must they be thinking? What is Samantha going to do in this situation? With a little smirk on their face is how I felt they were maybe thinking. And when I looked down at Charlie, I realized that I was boiling with rage. I was drowned in confusion. I was in conflict with this vision that I had about loving children and making a difference in their lives, and yet not knowing what to do in this moment. And I was equipped. I had ideas from mindfulness about like get out a breathing ball and help Charlie take breaths, or the gentle parenting approach, which wasn't called that 20 years ago, but people recognize it now, which is like, well, maybe I should sit with him and have him express his feelings, which by the way, like melting down, screaming and kicking is expressing his feelings. Or maybe I should be firm, like my traditional authoritarian childhood and like the way that I was brought up by my parents, which is I am the grown up, you will obey me, I have your best interest in mind. And really how that story shifted was I came to this moment of not knowing what to do and getting honest about it and bribing Charlie and bringing him back to his classroom without disrupting the rest of the class. I know I work with a lot of educators, so rest assured, like I wasn't causing that kind of chaos.
Of course you weren't.
However, when I went to my office and put my head in my hands, I really wrestled with, am I in the wrong job? What did I sign up for? And who knew that at that time, 16 years before I had my own child, that was really paving the way for me to understand the feelings that parents have when they're raising what I call emotionally intense kids. So these are kids with big feelings and big reactions. And my work led me to consult with who I found as mentors myself, these amazing occupational therapists who specialize in sensory integration, play therapists who understood that going in through an avenue of joy and letting kids express themselves was a natural vehicle for their growth if you knew how to facilitate that. And of course, brain science. So looking at Dr. Daniel Siegel's work with The Whole Brain Child and many other books, to understand that ultimately what's going on in all of these disciplines and how they're working with children has some sort of rooted pattern of the child's brain is stuck in fight or flight. If you're advanced in your own therapeutic journey or reparenting experience, you also understand like this component of freeze or maybe even fawn. And so when I look now back at Charlie, I think, well, he was in fight mode as kids who express themselves emotionally and behaviorally often are. They're expressing and outward. But what was equally important was, where was I? When rage was boiling, that was fight mode, which was a pretty good imprint on a little bit of what was happening in my home with some of the parenting and the 4 siblings I was raised with. But you know what I tended toward? Freeze. Freeze and fawn, put on a smile, pretend like I know what I'm doing, and then not really know how to move forward and feeling really stuck. And as you can imagine, anybody listening can now relate to this, right? You relate to this as a grown-up, as an entrepreneur, as a married woman. Parents relate to this, professionals who work with these kids and then have challenging situations at home. And it's like hard to find that tender space to say, I need help too. Yes. Like this is a human thing that's happening. And so I know that your original question was like, how did you get into this work? And I'm leading with that professional story. But really, when I look back, when I was growing up, I had food sensitivities, but we didn't know it because in the 80s and 90s, if you had trouble going to the bathroom or your stomach hurt, you put bran in the cereal and ate like bran muffins. That didn't help the situation. That didn't increase my
just rub some
habits.
dirt in it in the metaphorical way, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And really how that evolved over 10 more years. When I was 14, 15, 16, I would have such bad anxiety. I would black out before high school. And this wasn't recognized in my family. I remember having a really great relationship and love towards my dad. And he would be reading the newspaper and listening to the KQ 92 morning show. Yes. And drinking his coffee in the living room. And I would put my bread in the toaster. And then the room would not like it would perceptually go black. It would literally go black to my eyes. And so I would lay down on the floor and I could still hear my dad like turning the pages and sipping his coffee. And I would lay my body down where my head was on the living room carpet because it was soft and my body was on that 1970s linoleum floor in the kitchen. And then within a matter of minutes, never probably more than 10 minutes, I would guess, 15 minutes, the lights would turn on again. I felt like I could stand up and not be too dizzy. And I would take my now cold toast, slather it with peanut butter, wash it down with a glass of milk. And my dad and he would allow me to drive to high school. Like that was my driving practice at 15 years old. So when I think back about why did I evolve my work from being speech language pathologist to a certified parent coach and trained in life coaching, it's because there was this moment of understanding that if we don't see what's going on with a child who is laying on the floor, physically laying on the floor, if we don't see what's going on, if we don't have more knowledge and holistic and strange learnings about what that could be, if we can't look at more possibility, what's going to happen could be similar to when I had approached my dad. I was in my mid to late 30s, and I was preparing a children's mental health TED Talk for our Minnesota State Association. And as I was preparing this 18-minute speech, and I realized this story, I had a conversation with my dad, and I said, why didn't you ever say something to me about blacking out as a teenager? And he looked at me with genuine surprise and compassion, and he said, you were blacking out? And And it was this moment where, I had this identity for 30 years of being the kid who was sensitive, whose stomach hurt, who had anxiety, who would get so overwhelmed that my mom would have to sit on the bed next to me as a 16-year-old so that because she knew if she was with me when it was time for me to clean my room, I needed relationship to get started. And she knew, I just need to get you started and then you're going to be okay. Like she helped me overcome those barriers of freeze. And so why am I doing the work that I'm doing? It's so much of, if we can see kids and genuinely have this perspective that kids have gifts and their behavior and their feelings and moods are communicating something, then we can interpret them differently, offer them guidance. And then, who doesn't want to give kids the childhood that they deserve?
Absolutely. Let that sink in, y'all. Well, and what I'm hearing too in what you're sharing is at the core of it, it's not these paradigms of like, oh, you have a bad kid or there's something wrong with you. It's looking with wonder and saying, what's happening at the core of this? Which, as you alluded to, it's not just for kids. We see it and hear, or rather a lot of chiropractors and parents listen to this. It's the nervous system. It's the core of that. And if we can understand as guides or parents or coaches or you other health professionals listening to this, like what's really happening at the core of this. And what I'm also hearing is how connected are you, right? How connected are you as someone who is around kids and really your own inner child? And I've seen you over there. When did we meet? Like 2015, I want to say. It's almost been 10 years. And I've seen you, and I know you before that had done a lot of work, but I've seen you really continue to tend to those inner, I don't want to say wounds, because I think your wounds can turn into wisdom, but how that's now transpired into your little one and how it's such a possibility in the culture, right? Like you are such a possibility for people. And I feel like what you just shared, that could be the podcast in of itself, y'all, but it's so profound when you can have that shift of, oh, what's happening in me? What's happening in the nervous system versus this is bad, or, there's nothing to do with me. It's just my kid, right? So I'm curious if you want to expand on that. Parents, we see a lot of parents who they bring their kids in, and I know, your husband does too. They bring their kids in and, they're noticing these behaviors and they just want them to go away, or they think they're bad, or they're labeling them. And what we see is, okay, well, what's happening with the parent, right? What's happening with the parent's nervous system? So I'm curious, your perspective on that. Like, how do we start to reconcile, like, hey, it's not just your kid, right? And your kid actually has amazing gifts. and there's nothing wrong here, but their nervous system is dealing with this differently. That ties into the regulation with you. So I don't know if there's anything, it's not really a question, but
thank you. I got you.
Yeah, it's a hot topic right now that I'm seeing. And I think it's parents having the sobering thought, like, hey, there's like work for you to do here too, you know? So anyway.
Especially when parents will say, oh, my kid does great at school, or they do great with their counselor or their mental health professional, but not at home. That is often an indicator that there's something that those professionals are doing. They're using a certain set of skills. It doesn't always mean they're self-regulated and grounded, although that is easier to do socially and publicly rather than behind the closed doors of your personal home, as we know from our marriages and our, bringing up my own child. And yet, really, I think that when it comes to parenting, if we're falling in this trap of, I want to fix my kid, that really is the trap. Because that is showing you that you have a belief that something is wrong with your kid that needs to be improved on. And boy, am I influenced by a dear friend of mine, Amy, who does somatics work and family healing work in various ways. And I remember talking to her when my child was born and had some birth trauma and a posterior tongue tie. Weight gain was really difficult. There were a lot of things that felt traumatic to me about the birth experience and newborn experience in my family. And when I would talk to her about like, well, how did you navigate this? And she'd say, oh yeah, my kid had a posterior tongue tie. And instead of like running to this practitioner and that practitioner, what she said was sometimes when you do less, especially if you're in this freeze mode, they call it freezy business and the organic intelligence model taught by Steve Hoffman. That's not right. Excuse me. Steve Hoskinson. Thank you. I got my chiropractic hat on with Hoffman. Steve Hoskinson. That doing less is sometimes the way to move forward. And when you do less, you're now not operating under this like, go, something's wrong to fix it, but you're letting your organic intelligence unfold. Right. So when we're talking about parenting, there's a direct line between how happy is your child and how happy do you know to be in your life. Now, this is tricky, parents and friends, okay? So when you're working with parents or you don't have your own kids yet, please understand that as parents, we can go down the shame spiral like that. Fast. Like we're like, oh, it's a reflection of me. And there's kind of some brain science that backs this up. I talk about mirror neurons a lot, which is this concept that your kids have mirror neurons and you have mirror neurons, and it's a reflection of the state they're in. Well, let's let us off the hook here and understand that when somebody walks in with a toxic mood in the workplace, you're like, yikes, stay away from this person because it's going to disrupt my high vibes for the day. But the same thing is true if you have a kid who is had some birth trauma or their vagus nerve is off or something along the spine and they're dysregulated, or other reasons they have food sensitivities or pandas or Lyme's, like things that haven't even been identified yet. If their behavior is showing you that something is off, your mirror neurons will trigger. And if they go into fight mode, which is where we're like, I got to fix it. Well, that's because it's triggering fight mode in you. Yep. So you're disrupted, you're dysregulated, and you can't like disconnect this line of I'm going to help my kid and not help myself. Yes. Because if my kid is up screaming at all hours of the day for 4 months and somebody's calling it colic, but changing acid reflux and food, personal story, doesn't make any difference in your child, well, guess who's going to need nervous system work? Yep. Me. The parent is I don't need to just bring my kid to the lactation consultant or the pediatric chiropractor or the craniosacral therapist. Yep. So please understand that if your child is having a hard time, you're going to get triggered into your fight. You're going to feel what they're feeling. So if you're like, I was never an angry person until I became a parent. Yeah, here you go. Like you have it all. We have it all. Absolutely. But the same thing is true. If you act on this and your prefrontal cortex is fully developed, if you have your own behavioral management tools, you have the ability to pay attention, you have the ability to stop, change the channel, breathe, and do something differently, and you don't, if you yell, if you hurt, if you shame, if you give away your power, the mirror neurons in your child's brain says, that's what we do when we're stressed. So do I want to shame anybody? Absolutely not. We take on so much responsibility as parents, but know that if your child has challenging behaviors, there's often a tool that you're missing. Yeah. that somebody else is using. Thank goodness that teacher that your child resonates with, the practitioner you love to take them to. Thank goodness they have that tool. And sometimes, they take their kid to see you, Dr. Mel, and they're like so relaxed here until we walk out. Well, guess what Dr. Mel has as a tool? Does she know about positive discipline? Does she know about routines? Do you know about conflict resolution with kids? Possibly, maybe not. You haven't maybe studied that exactly in child development, but the tool you have is groundedness and self-regulation. Yep. So when we're parenting, would you permit me to read a little bit from the book I'm writing?
Yes. She's writing a book, y'all.
Yeah.
And I actually just learned this the other day. So, and by the way, before you get into it, what Samantha's speaking to y'all, like she's got a ton of resources, and I'm imagining there's going to be a lot in your book that you're writing, but listen, I'm going to invite you to listen to what she's saying, not just with your ears and your mind, but with your heart and your body. To be able to absorb this for yourself and really follow these threads of parenting can actually be, I don't want to say fun all the time, but it can be different. Yeah. Right? You can live into a different paradigm of parenting for your kids that maybe was different than what you experienced growing up.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and thank you for that. I know that I'm kind of getting ranty right now.
But it's a calling forth in a loving way. It's not meant to shame you guys, but these are future generations we're talking about. And this is the Project Lioness podcast where it's bold, raw, real truths. So I think sometimes, truth doesn't always feel good, but maybe it's that little ooh, yeah, how does that land in my body? Follow that thread. So I support you.
Thank you. Thank you. I trusted I could be it all here today.
You're in good company.
Yeah. So knowing, and so let me ease back and let us know that while there are rants about parenting, obviously I have some soapboxes that I stand on because I want children to feel seen. But the other thing is I want you to love parenting. Yeah. I want you to enjoy it and find joy. And is parenting fun all the time? No. Is there joy? Yeah. And I actually had to come to this point in raising my 4-year-old where I wasn't embarrassed to be super happy as a parent, where I pick him up from preschool, a nature preschool, and he's done at 3:30, and I'm leisurely because I've ended my work for the day. I separate parenting and entrepreneurship and work. Yeah. So when his school schedule changed, I decided that I'm going to be done to pick him up at 3:30. And he gives me this big barrel hug. And he goes, Mom, guess what I was thinking about today? I want to take you on this hike. And we spend 30, 40 more minutes on the nature preschool land and nobody else is there, which is fine. They go about their days. But we have this joyful present moment experience, which is a relief from me grinding and working so hard when my work hours are turned on, when I hit that internal clock. Yeah. So when we're parenting, here's the lightness. Is how we parent a reflection of our skills? And here's my reading. Okay. It can be, but there's many people who work with kids and have fancy degrees who know the tools, but they still end up yelling, fighting, and engaged in power struggles at home. So how you parent can be a reflection of the tools you know, but don't always use. But importantly, parenting is a barometer of your feelings, your capacity, your self-regulation, your knowingness of how to find fulfillment and enjoyment in relationships. So sometimes it's a sign of your communication, your articulation, or ability to express yourself, to have a boundary met or get your message across. But let's start here. When it comes to parenting and kids having challenging behaviors, one of my first questions is, how are you feeling? Right? How are you feeling? Are you exhausted, at wit's end? Are you filled with sadness, grief, sorrow, remorse, overwhelmed, powerless, scared, infuriated? Are you trapped, despairing, unhappy, guilty? You might be wondering, what have I done? What am I doing? Will this ever get better, and how? And here's the thing about parenting. You're not a sitting duck that's doing nothing. Mm-hmm. You can't be. When you're raising a child and feeding and sheltering and helping them rest, you're doing a lot. You're managing phone calls from teachers and clinicians and therapists and doctors and holistic professionals. You might have your EMF person, your functional medicine, your homeopath, your chiropractor. It's possible you have a paying job and responsibility there, but this is also, parenting is an indicator of, do I know how to rest? Do I know how to get a break from it all? So what we explore in whenever you engage with a certified parent coach like myself, who has a holistic perspective that cares about your kids deeply, obviously, but I care about you deeply and hopefully, obviously, that if you want to become the parent that you've always wanted to be, then this is the space where you get to be a whole person as a parent. You get to look at skills that make a real difference in calm, connection, and collaboration and lasting change. And in the process, you feel equipped with tools, maybe happier in general, and more confident. And what then occurs is if you know how to speak differently to your child, if you use methods like practicing the calm mantra, keep a calm body, a calm voice, a calm face. If you learn what are the things that fuel the fire and you avoid language like, no, you can't do this. No, we're not eating that. No more screen time. Like if you learn how to shift into positive language and speak to your child in ways where they feel acknowledged. I see you're upset. Yesterday we had this big emotional expression. And what happened was my husband adjusted me. I asked for an adjustment before bed, and we've got a table in the landing area of our home. And so he adjusted me. And as I went to lay on the table, my 4-year-old said, no, I want to get adjusted first. And this is out of the blue because he doesn't usually, sometimes he requests adjustment, but not always to go first. And so he got really upset. And I'm like, nope, I asked for the adjustment. I'm going to go first. It's going to help me navigate bedtime routine in a way that feels really enjoyable. I'll feel really relaxed. And as I was getting adjustment, he was climbing on my body. It took about 15 minutes instead of 3 minutes to get adjusted. It was a very functional adjustment where my nervous system was going in waves and up and down. Like, now adjust me here. Let's see if we can find balance in this space. It was a challenge for everybody. But my child was really upset. And so he cried and screamed for 25 minutes. Now, this doesn't happen regularly anymore. And I had this moment of just watching him and holding space and not disconnecting and just like being quiet until it ended. I wasn't just in this. I was looking at him compassionately. And I noticed, I always ask myself the question, what is the feeling underneath this? Well, the feeling, it wasn't impatient, even though that's been the theme when he's been 3.5 into 4s. It was the theme of waiting. He wanted to go first. And so I in various moments, I'd say, waiting is hard. You didn't want to wait. You wanted to go first. So I was saying the words he said. I wanted to go first. Now I'm not going to get adjusted. What am I going to do? I really want to get adjustment, Mom. What am I going to do? And I didn't fix it for him, but I was with him. And what it turned into in 20 minutes or so, I said, you know what? I bet you have to wait a lot at school. And waiting is hard. You probably have to wait for snack. You wait in line to go potty. You might have to wait for the craft supplies to come around to you. And I paused, knowing that that's sinking into his limbic system. It's the emotional part of our processing brain. And I was going to just like keep saying what I was saying or stop saying anything. And he got quiet and he said, and waiting for the gate to open. Well, they go for hikes every day and he's excited and curious. And so he shared with me that it's hard to wait for the gate to open and go run out on the hike. And I said, yeah, waiting is really hard. Did that end it? No. Did he still, I call this something more diplomatic than fake crying, but like, did he do that for another 10 minutes while we were navigating brushing teeth? Yeah, he did. He's like, how am I going to brush my teeth? I still want to cry. I'm like, okay, why don't we brush first and then you can cry? So he'd like stop and I'd brush his teeth and then he'd like look at himself and crying in the mirror, which means he's not dysregulated or melting down anymore. This is now a behavior that he's playing with. And I had the space and the time. And so then he's like, well, how are we going to read a book when I'm crying? And I said, well, you can stop crying and we can read a long book, or you can keep crying and we'll have time for a short book. And he's like, can I cry to go pick up my book and then read a long book? I said, sure. And that was it. Now that was 20 years of experience with me.
Yeah.
But what happened was there was this emotional pressure valve release for him, which he needed. And what does this indicate? Okay, so for those of you who are like, I had an amazing parenting moment like that, this is an indicator of all of the things that I just said. How, when you're navigating behaviors, it is a description, it is a signal of your feelings, your capacity, your self-regulation, your own fullness and fulfillment, your communication, and the ability to express yourself.
Boom. Wow. I'm curious in what you're sharing, and thank you for that. I love when someone can walk us through a real-time scenario, because what parent hasn't navigated some version of that, whether they perceived it that they navigated it in a regulated way or maybe not. So thank you for like walking us through your own experience. What came to mind when you were sharing is how much of this also really just, helps parents heal, like not just kids, but all these tools you're mentioning, which I know are in a lot of what you offer in your programs and, hopefully your book that I'm excited to read in the future.
Thank you.
And have some copies in the office. How much of this do you see like deeply heals adults too? Like things that we never learned or taught for our own nervous system, or even I don't want to say, de-escalating or like regulating nervous systems maybe in the workplace or entrepreneurship, because you're an entrepreneur. How much do you see that really show up in those aspects of life with the parents you work with?
Yeah, it's a direct line. The thing about parenting is you've likely been parenting. I mean, people who work with me, they tend to be about 30s through maybe late 50s. And so what that is often an indicator of is whether they have a 3-year-old or a 13-year-old or multiples, obviously, right? Like you've often been in the workplace longer than you've been a parent. And so you might say, well, this doesn't show up in the workplace. And it's like, really? You don't study your own personality, like inventory through some sort of test like StrengthsFinder to see where you thrive and where you fall apart? Wait, what do you do about challenging conversations? Oh, I see. So you know how to do those politely and productively, or you don't, and you suppress, repress, or explode. Well, guess what? That's happening at home because you don't have the safety net of a social barrier and like public accountability. And so those communication skills that you might be using at work, if you do have those skills, you've practiced them longer. Or you mask it. And so when you're parenting, it's how do we draw that line to be able to do that at home? And when you learn to do that at home, it's so rewarding. You're like, oh my gosh, I felt like I wanted to throw something across the room and I didn't. Like, yeah. So we start with this idea. I like to make things practical. I know I'm talking really high level today.
No, we love practicality. Also, if you all see me, the sun is like just beaming right now, and it's...
You're just in your radiance.
Yeah, in my radiance and just listening to Samantha talk with my eyes closed, which is quite enjoyable. So if you guys see me doing that.
I might do it too. My mirror neurons are like, I'm going to close my eyes.
We're just going to close our eyes if you guys are watching on YouTube.
That's right. So really, actually, what I'm hired for youth mental health conferences and autism conferences and like parenting keynotes is to talk about how do we calm challenging behaviors. And I like to teach 3 essential skills. And one of the skills is this calm mantra that I talked about. But you start trying to calm your body, your voice, and your face in the moment. And now what happens is your inner narrative gets really loud. I just want it to stop. I take care of you all day long. Why can't we just do this? I was going to do something fun with you and now you've ruined it. Like when we get to understand what our inner narrative is, we get to that deeper layer because we started with a tool. Now we start really seeing where a disconnect is, some of our beliefs or some of our thinking or our patterned actions around things, or the influence of the other parent who's like, you need to be firmer, not softer, or you need to be softer, not firmer. Or your parent says, you got to do more, that's not how you were raised and you turned out fine. Like, okay, well, did I? Because
whatever fine means.
Exactly.
We say that in the office too. Like, what does fine really mean?
What percentage of Americans are on medication to help regulate things like I grew up with anxiety or depression or other, states of mood?
I just saw a stat on this. It's like 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 adult women are on some form of anti-anxiety or SSRI. And it's exploded since, 2020.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. With all that isolation and living apart from each other, for sure. Not having community, which is already a pandemic in terms of parenting and not doing it in community and tribes. So what do we learn as we parent? Well, we learn how to calm ourselves. And after people work with me, either with my 8-week online course or the 6 months of hand-holding guided group coaching that I do, one that starts this month of October, what happens is at the end of it, they say that first tool of calm body, voice, and face does make a difference. But the problem is you can't stop there. Most of us need 3 to 5 tools for ourselves and for our kids So you possibly also need some sort of emotional acknowledgement.
Yes.
Right? Like you might not have a partner who says to you, they could be very loving and they do their share of taking on the emotional burden of planning at home, doing some of the housework, whatever that is. And yet, if you walk in after some self-care and they're like, all right, here you go. And you're like, wait, I'm overwhelmed. Wait, but you just had all that time alone. If they don't acknowledge the feeling of you're overwhelmed, well, now there's going to be this feeling of disconnect, of not real closeness. So when you learn these skills of, I personally, as Samantha, I need to ask to be acknowledged when I'm worried. It looks like I'm mad at somebody. It looks like I'm frustrated, but really I'm worried. And so when my husband says, when Ty's like, I can hear you're worrying. And sometimes I tell him in the moment, I'm ranting myself. And I'm like, honey, can you just like acknowledge the worry? And he'll say, I can see you're worried. He can fake it and it still works.
It still works.
And I'm like, I am worried. And now I turn into sadness and I soften. And just like I was talking about with my kid, like I'm going to express myself for 10, 15 or 20 more minutes. Mm-hmm. But now this pressure valve is released. And this is how brain science works. This is the practicality. When you coach somebody and acknowledge their feelings, they feel seen and heard. And now the volume of complaining, arguing, negotiating, power struggling, yelling to be heard, the volume from a brain science perspective turns down because you're seen and heard.
Yep.
So when you get good at this, now you bring this, you bring your work skills of acknowledging people on your team to your home. Mm-hmm. You bring it possibly if you have a significant relationship. And now you feel really fulfilled where I'm like, oh yeah, I noticed that my kid is having a hard time with waiting. Well, vice versa. I might come in this morning, I'm like, hey Mel, I need to meditate and like review my journaling from this morning from my book. And I can say, I hope that's okay to ask for a little time for you to wait. Yeah. Right? Like I'm getting good at articulating and acknowledging waiting. And now that acknowledges the dynamic and there's not these unspoken, like what's happening here? Yeah. It's just really clear.
Yep. I'm hearing the body piece and then the emotional piece, which then, as you said beautifully, like when that bottom up brain approach is acknowledged, then boom, while kids, their prefrontal cortex isn't developed, us as adults, we can allow the bottom up blossom of our brain to stay online and feel connected. But there's the body piece, the emotional piece, and eventually the mental piece, which totally shows up in our perception and our consciousness. I mean, even what you shared earlier, which I thought was, to me, it feels like magic, but it's just science. And like being connected was like, oh, the awareness and the recognition of like, this is what my kiddo's dealing with waiting, because you're connected to that within yourself, or learning how to connect to that in yourself. And even you being able to demonstrate that today, like, hey Mel, I want to review this. Like, is that cool? And it's like, yeah, no problem. Like, I want you to feel safe and connected and you expressing your most authentic self. But what I'm hearing is, that whole approach. It's not just a mental game, but connecting to your own body, having your emotions be regulated, whether it's with your partner or someone else that you're raising kids with. My question in that, if I may, unless there's more that you wanted to expand on that, how, and this may be part of your program, how do you start to invite that partner or, other people into that dynamic who maybe haven't been given these tools? How do you, and that's probably a whole book, a whole course, a whole freaking curriculum in and of itself, but something we see in the office is maybe the mom is the one bringing in the kids, right? And so they're learning these things from us or from people, but maybe the other parent is not on board. How do you start to create that co-parenting, we're on the same team experience?
Yeah. Can we just do a shout out to the moms?
Yes. Shout out to the moms.
Shout out to the moms. I know dads. I know that you do this too. And,
yes.
Moms can be a really great bridge. Bridge is the right word. Especially when we're connected to our own voice, our own bodies, our own empowerment. There's so many moms I've worked with who say, I'm stressed about reducing my hours, but I really think I need to. I think that's what my kid needs if they're paid working parents.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's the decision that they make. I know these tools, but I don't have the space because I don't have the capacity because I'm working too much. It's not feminine enough for me. Yeah. I want to just be with my kid. Yeah. And so moms, I've seen them make a lot of these decisions like this, and changing diets and, signing up for health programs and things like that and being the leader. And I like to say from child development that kids are like ducklings and they imprint on the grown-up around them. If your child's had an amazing third grade teacher and they perform or relate really well there's some sort of skills and body thing that's happening with that teacher. Yep. And your child is relating really well to that. And then your child might go into fourth grade and they have a teacher who's totally different. And you're like, oh my gosh, my kid doesn't relate well to that. They're crying. They don't want to go to school. There's avoidance. There's anxiety. Now we should call them these other resources. And I give you permission to advocate and say, oh, this feeling, this behavior, these moods are telling us something. Maybe it's not the right match. Mm-hmm. And I see parents pulling their kids out instead of like, finish the school year, finish the fitness or the sports program you signed up for. Maybe there's places that's important and there's places where it's not. Yeah. So that gut instinct is really important. Yeah. So how do we get people on board? Well, guess what? When you lead and you do something and you feel confident in yourself, I hear people, I have friends who come to see you and there's one mom who's raising 4 kids and like she has the confidence that this is the right thing for her. Yeah. This is the right thing for her kids. And so the kids develop that groundedness from coming in here and I don't know anything else about her family dynamic or her marriage, but to make this point about kids like ducklings that imprint on the adult around them, if mom is confident bringing them in, the kids are confident it's working. They have this peaceful experience together. Now their mirror neurons are all in sync instead of power struggling and battling against each other. And usually a partner who's on board and engaged in the marriage will say, I want that. I want that. Do they want chiropractic? Maybe, maybe not. But do they want that kind of peaceful relationship? A lot of people do. Uh-huh. And so they might not be on board right away I always ask my married or partnered couples, I always ask them for both of them to show up for the first 2 classes because we hit what's happening with fight, flight, freeze, or fun right away with everybody in the family, all the kids and the grownups involved. And we talk about what are you doing to fuel the fire? And because I was raised in this really unique family where my dad has an MBA and has like this engineering mind and like really linear, sequential and analytical. And my mom, when my sister, who was the 5th kid, I'm 4 out of 5, when she went to kindergarten, the principal allowed my mom to come in and start telling stories. My mom was hired then for decades as a Finnish storyteller. She was known for telling the 3 bears in the Finnish language. So there's like this artful and creative side of things. So when partners attend the first 2 classes, we're doing art and we're doing science and we're weaving it together. We're weaving feminine and masculine together. And people have the opportunity to have their own awareness if they're in that space and they want to. And after 2 classes, the majority of partners say, I would like to continue on because they have this self-recognition of something that could do and feel better. Yes. So one parent's doing it, great, keep going. Does partnership make it easier? Because now you have a support network in your home environment. Totally. Of course it makes it easier. Like my husband is detoxing with me this month for 3 weeks and I hadn't invited him into it. I've done it 7 or 8 years now. And I said, hey, I'm starting on Wednesday. And he goes, oh, by the way, he left me a little walkie-talkie message with this app that we use. By the way, I think that would be cool if I could do it with you. Would that be okay? I'm like, absolutely.
Yes.
So he invited himself in 7 or 8 years later. I don't like try to draw anybody in anymore or pull them in. Your well-being is invitation enough.
Ooh, your well-being is invitation enough. Quote that, my friends. And what I'm hearing is it's that inside-out game. You know, if you choose to lead or choose these things and not trying to change, it's back to what you said earlier, right? You're not trying to change your partner, you're not trying to change your kids, but there's this law of entrainment or entanglement happening where as you embody it with confidence or choosing to do detoxes, it's funny you say that because Ben, has seen me do these things over the years. And he literally brought up the other day, he's like, hey, we should do that 2-week detox. I was like, I'm sorry, what? And it was, we've evolved in our relationship. So it's fun. Because
love you, Ben.
Yeah. Love you, Ben. Love you, babe. He does have a podcast episode with me of this. But it's that inside out game. And, that's something I coach a lot and teach is like, hey, how can you embody it, right? So that your kids by proximity or your partner by proximity, their nervous system starts to entrain to you. And that to me is so much more effortless. Like you're not trying to change or fix or force. It's like, hey, it's magnetism. really. It's a magnetic experience. And that's not a woo-woo thing, y'all. Like your nervous system has magnetic fields. And so as we radiate whatever that is, what we want to embody and see in the world, it's only a matter of time before that magnetism starts to really show up in others and see them in their own unique form, right? It's not going to look just like you, but in their own unique rhythm and form and their own timing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love this idea of it's inside out, it's nervous system, and then it influences things externally. Mm-hmm. And in the parenting world, my teacher said, parent coaching is the place where you give tools and advice. Yeah. Already, this is different than other disciplines who say, I'm here to listen. I'm not supposed to interlay and offer like my opinions onto you. And I love parent coaching because this is the place where we give tools. Yep. So it is also the outside in. So it's both. Yep. And Ty and I will talk about this. We get hired to keynote now and talk to childcare directors and centers about what's going on in the classroom and what people can do when it's sensory versus behavior versus relational. And it's the inside out. And a starting point for parents is often the outside in. Yeah. So here's your tool. Identify your top fire starter. Practice avoiding it for a week. Do this instead. Yep. Okay, here's the tool. Your kid's having feelings. You're ticked off. You're running away. You're feeling powerless. And now they hit you. And now you're like, I'm scared. What do I do with these feelings? Just to like run the gamut of spectrum of how parents might be feeling. Right. And the tool is, I want you to ask yourself how are they feeling? Experiment with labeling that. Notice if they scream, stop saying that. Notice if they just keep screaming and it doesn't sink in. Notice if you can show them differently by like looking at them compassionately with your eyes. So we start with really practical tools, and it can't help but gel and be slimed together. It's inside out and it's outside in. So where I'm strong is the practical plan. Yeah. Find these 8 tools. Self-identify. You're going to know what are your top 3 to 5 that make a big difference. Don't end. Like keep doing it. Rinse and repeat. This is not an Instagram reel where you get a really good tool and now there's a smattering of ideas that you've saved in folders. Me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yep.
But like this is the plan where now you repeat it for the whole season. Now you do it the next season and you come in community and you hear other parents talking about it. Now you don't feel alone. Now you feel more confident. Now you feel equipped if you're not getting that from your partner. Like we're starting to do these things where you practice laying habits, and it's also the science of habit change. Yes. Now, when you've done the downstairs approach, I've calmed the fire. I'm not adding fuel. I'm building relationship. I'm building happy chemicals instead of stress chemicals because you got to replace that excitement.
Absolutely.
You can't take a kid who's like used to like stirring up drama and just be calm with them. They need like high fives and high affect, but now you're exhausted. Okay, parent, what do we do? Back to the bottom. Let me teach you how to not be exhausted. So now you can be happy with them, excited with them. And now we get to the upstairs. Now we layer in conflict resolution, discipline, routines, boundaries. Now that stuff works.
Yep. And I'm imagining all of this is included in what you've got coming up. You mentioned you're open to sharing like your cohort this month. Is that all included in that or part of that? And tell us a little bit more. If someone's really resonating with what you're sharing, they want to expand into that, whether you're a professional or you're a parent, or I know you've got a lot of different courses and programs too, but tell us like, what does that all entail?
Yeah. Well, I have my DIY self-guided program. So someone who's like, I just want these tools and I think I just need the knowledge of it. And maybe you're thinking you have the tools and you want a co-parent to hear it. Okay, great. That's a nice investment option. So if anybody wants to learn about that, it's through my website, SamanthaMoe.com. And then twice a year only, I lead a 6-month immersion. It's done virtually where I hand guide you through the 8 tools. So you're not self-paced learning. We're saying 1 tool a week for 8 weeks. And then we go into our group setting when we do our live calls, currently scheduled for Wednesdays, starting at the end of October on the 23rd. And we do transformational coaching activities. How exactly do I apply this tool? And we do a little bit of small group work. So this is not listen to a webinar. Yeah. This is get in a community with anywhere from 20 to 50 parents is usually the number of people in my groups as of this recording. Yeah. And you know how to use the tool and you do it for a week and you come back and we talk what worked, what didn't. We troubleshoot, and then we layer in the next skill. So we're not moving on without understanding what's breaking apart. Is it something about your kid's diagnosis, about the family dynamic, about their age, about the way you implemented it in your tone? And when you hear somebody else get coached for 5 to 15 minutes in a group setting on that, you self-recognize, oh, this is where I fell off. Or thank goodness you're like, oh, this is what I'm doing great. I can move on to the next one. I feel awesome.
Yes.
And then paired with that is twice a month Ask Samantha calls. Yeah. So it's not going through each of the 8 pillars. It's saying what's happening.
Yep.
So it's like, hey, MEA weekend is done. My kid's teacher said this. We have school avoidance. What do I do? Yeah. Now we're coaching in real-time situations while you're also learning the pillars. And so we do that over the course of 6 months because I want 2 seasons with you. That's when you're going to have long-lasting change.
Yep. And it takes, months at times to rewire. Like neuroplasticity is amazing. And like time and repetition, as you said, is a beautiful thing to be in. And I love that you teach to not only like, you're not just a talking head, it's very practical, and there's actual creation in that, and actual experience of, okay, let's apply these things, not just hearing someone talk, which I think is so profound in our ability to learn and become, whatever it is you're stepping into, whether you are a practitioner and you want these skills, or you're a parent or you're a coach and you want to amplify. I mean, Samantha is a very gifted leader and teacher and guide. So anyone who chooses to enroll in that is, hands down, it's an amazing experience to be with her. And I've been in containers with her in leadership forums and for women, and it's truly amazing what you do.
Thank you. And I'm a believer in like the resonance and the draw. If this is resonating with you because you want some tools to talk to parents, or you are a parent, or you want to go through my certification, which we do next year. I always give professionals who want to work with parents and guide them through these 8 pillars. I have a certification curriculum. I give them a free seat in my 6-month parenting group so that they get to experience that transformation internally for their family first, as well as learn how to run groups and learn the arc and feel the arc of it. Mm-hmm. And so all that being said, I'm all about that resonance and alignment, and I'm happy to throw in a $250 coupon. I know you have a lot of people who would benefit from that. Yep. So if that code would be helpful, we're going to have that in the show notes. Yep. It's going to be specific to the people listening right now. Yep.
We'll put all of that in the show notes for y'all, because I know we have a lot of parents who are also, they're coaches or they're therapists. And as much as they know cognitively, there's definitely some skills and tools here and an experience that can only support them even more. So we'll put all that in the show notes for y'all. That will be in, if you listen on like Apple or Spotify. And for those of you who are YouTube people and you see us live, hello, that will be in the show notes as well. So anything else you want to add, my friend?
Yeah, I think sometimes we need a place just to get started. And so I also want to offer a PDF.
Yeah.
Kind of tactical, practical. And so if you go to the samanthamoe.com website and the parents page, at the very, very, very bottom, we have a button that says, would you like to know the 11 reasons emotionally intense kids act out? I talked about fire starter behaviors and starting phrases with no. There's actually 11 things hidden in everyday conversation that I've identified just from my own experience for over 20 years. So if you'd like that free 2-page PDF, that's also on the website. So you could go there and just read that as a guide, and that might help things percolate inside you.
I love that. Thank you for that gift. We'll include that specific link in the show notes, y'all. Because sometimes those very basic things that we're not even conscious of can be a huge game changer in starting the process. Cool.
Yeah. So, and then also just like my parting words that popped into mind is we talked about, we were talking about control. That's one of the words in my head here. And we're also talking about influence, and the other word that I don't think either of us specifically identified. And so like, remember that we can't control other people. Yeah. The only person we can control is ourselves. And so if you think you can control your kid, that's a myth. It's not true. And you know that, but you can influence them. And so when you're stepping into tools and mindset shift, or you have this big heart opening from a conversation like this today, or an adjustment you might get from Dr. Mel, now your influence radiates and it shines. So remember, what you do matters as a parent, and not in a negative shame spiral sort of way, but in that possibility and that hopefulness that gives me goosebumps. Like, what you do matters. You can so influence your happiness and your family dynamic.
What you do matters. Well, thank you, my friend. Seriously, from the bottom of my heart, that was gold. I feel like we could totally do a part 2 in this at some point.
Of course.
And we'll make sure that everyone has everything you need in the show notes so that you can tap into this woman and her amazing gifts and for you and for your family. So with that, thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for listening. If you found value in this and you know yourself or parents you know or people you know who would really resonate with what Samantha is sharing today, please, please, please share this episode with them. And as she said, what you do matters, even if it's one share that can shift the dynamic of a family. So this is Dr. Mel and Samantha. We are signing off, and we'll see you next time. Peace, love, and keep inspiring. Bye.
Thank you for joining the Project Lioness Podcast. Did you find value in today's episode? Help us impact the lives of others by sharing this podcast with someone you know who would resonate and benefit from the Project Lioness message. Excited to hear more? We invite you to subscribe on whatever platform you're tuning in on. And we'd be so grateful for you to leave us a review about what you enjoy most, as well as what you'd like to hear more of. Thank you so much for all of your support. Sincerely yours in power, purpose, and play. Dr. Mel with the Project Lioness Podcast. Keep rising, keep roaring, and keep inspiring.